Long debate on the floor today. Exciting stuff. Are there any bill introductions today? Seeing no bill introductions. I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on HB 2088, and we'll get a brief description of what the bill does from Reviser Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. HB 2088 sets out a fast-track procedure to streamline the city, county, or other local governmental review process for building permits. The bill applies to two types of applications to local government authorities. First, a request for a building permit or other required approval of an action regarding the residential, commercial, or industrial development projects. And second, an appeal to a zoning board of appeals or planning commission designated as a zoning board of appeals by any person, including any officer of a city, county, or other governmental agency, with regard to administration of zoning ordinances or resolutions. Local government authorities are defined as a governing body, commission, board, or other authority of a municipality, city, or county, township, district, or other political subdivision of the state with jurisdiction. The bill requires local government authorities to approve or deny an application and provide written notice of the decision to an applicant within 60 days of receipt of a complete application. The local government authority must state reasons for a denial. The local government authority is prohibited from denying an application or requiring conditions for approval on the basis of an ordinance or resolution or policy adopted or amended after the date the application is submitted. If the local government authority fails to provide the written notice within the deadline, the application is deemed to be approved by the local governmental authority. The bill contains provisions pertaining to procedure in the case of an incomplete application and also the situation where an applicant is not able to remedy a deficiency in a sufficient time period. In that case, then the bill provides that the governmental authority would deny the application with leave to resubmit. No additional fee may be charged in that case. The bill defines when an application is deemed submitted and when a notice of decision is deemed to have been provided, and that includes by electronic means. The bill's provisions are not intended to supersede any resolution or ordinance of a local government that would provide a shorter time period to issue decisions. The bill amends a couple of statutes. First, KSA 12752, the statute addressing submission of proposed plats to planning commissions to conform with the provisions of the bill, and the bill also makes conforming amendments to 12759, again, to conform to the process and timing requirements of the bill. And there's also a requirement added to that statute that notices of hearings, in addition to the typical publication in a newspaper, be also provided on the city or county website if the city or county has a website. If enacted, this bill would become effective July 1st, 2025. That is what the bill does. Same for questions.
All right, any questions for the reviser? Thank you, Charles. Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charles, I've got a question just at least as far as some of the bill just, so it addresses just permits and plats. Does it address any other type of development approvals, or is it just permits and plats?
No, the scope of the bill is actually quite broad. If you look at it would apply to an action by any local governmental approval. Local government is also defined broadly, related to the development of a single-family residential, multifamily residential, commercial, or industrial improvement upon real estate within the jurisdiction of such local governmental authority. And local governmental authority is also defined broadly as an applicable governing body, commission, board, other authority of a municipality, city, county, township, district, or other political subdivision of the state. So the bill has broad scope.
My goodness, thank you.
Any further questions for the reviser? Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you'll go back to that for just a minute. And so would then it be uniformly applied to all classes of cities? Therefore, no one
No
could,
distinction about how it would apply.
all right, so no home rule in this. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions for you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and open up proponent testimony, and we'll start with Tanner Temple from Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Again, my name is Tanner Temple. I am the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity. I appreciate the opportunity to speak regarding HB 2088, which requires local governments to decide on building permit applications within 60 days with an automatic approval if deadlines are missed. Kansas, like much of the country, is experiencing a housing affordability crisis. The shortage of available homes is driving up prices, making it harder for families to find affordable housing. Over the past 10 years, the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency's house price index has increased by 71%. Permitting delays does increase housing costs. A study from Washington State shows that each month of a delay adds $4,400 to the price of a new home. These extra costs are passed on to buyers, making homes even less affordable. This bill establishes a clear timeline for permit decisions, saving both homeowners and developers time and money and making housing more affordable. HB 2088 is similar to the shot clock model used in other states like Texas and Florida. In the Texas model, the bill sets a 30-day deadline for municipalities to approve or deny development permits. If no decision is made within 30 days, the application is automatically approved. This law has made the permitting process faster and more predictable, encouraging timely housing development. In the Florida example, Florida's shot clock law sets specific deadlines for local governments to review building permit applications. In the last year, after this law was implemented, Florida saw a 30% increase in new building permits, which is much higher than the national average. And I would also like to note on Florida, after the 30-day timeline, they start doing a deduction, so a 10% penalty that would go back to the applicant after that 30 days. So there is a timeline after that 30 days that money would go back to the applicant. Faster permitting processes will lower costs for developers, allowing them to build more homes at lower prices. These savings mean quicker timelines and fewer obstacles for businesses investing in Kansas. A growing housing market will attract new residents, businesses, and investments, boosting our economy and making Kansas a better place to live and work. This bill is not just about housing, it's about making Kansas competitive in the national economy. For these reasons, we urge the committee to pass HB 2088 in its current form. Thank you, and I will stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for the conferee? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. So at the end of your testimony, you say we urge committee to pass this in its current form. Does that mean you guys would oppose any amendments if we want to put in amendments?
You know, I gave that example on the Florida one. I mean, making it even shorter. I mean, I would be open for ideas on that, absolutely. I mean, it's a 60-day, what we're looking at right now. We can make it 30 days. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely room.
Okay, and the second question, if I may, is to what extent is this a problem? Can you give examples in Kansas? For me in my district, I would say almost never, very rarely are permitting delays from kind of the city's standpoint the issue. The issue is always kind of resident opposition, you know, and so to what extent is this actually an issue in hampering development of housing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific one at the top of mind, but I could dig into it and send you something, so.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't see a real reason to be passing legislation without proving that there is a problem.
Yeah, so this was a recommendation that came out of the Housing Committee over the break, and there was evidence in there, so that's why we decided to bring it. Representative Corbett.
I think you've got a good start here. It'd be nice if we could even go faster, but Is this gonna cover any small business or anything like that, or just residential?
I would have to look into that. I'm speaking more on the housing side right now, so, I don't have that at the top of mind, sir.
Charles, can you answer that question?
Representative, it applies to all types of residential developments and also commercial and industrial developments.
Thanks, Charles. I know in Shawnee County, there's a problem with getting things out on a timely manner, so I think it'd be a good deal if we could get it passed.
Yes, sir.
Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is actually for the reviser. I don't have the bill with me. Could you read to us who it's been requested by?
Certainly, Representative, it was requested by Andrew Weens on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project.
Okay, but not any legislators from the Housing Committee. Thank you.
Yeah, so for the record, it was my recommendation in the Housing Committee. Any other questions for the conferee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, sir. I believe we have Jim Manley online. Can we try to bring him up?
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm Jim Manley. I'm the State Policy Chief for Pacific Legal Foundation. PLF is a national nonprofit law firm that has been working on property rights and housing issues for over 50 years. And it was a pleasure to participate in the Special Committee on Availability and Affordability of Housing. And I'm glad to see this recommendation come out of that committee. As we discussed back in the fall, the speed and delays equal money, and Tanner just explained that in great detail. The other thing that I'd like to emphasize is the finality that this bill offers. It gives folks who want to develop their property some certainty that they will get a decision up or down within a particular period of time. And what we've seen across the country is jurisdictions delaying decisions and delaying them to the point that folks don't even know when or if they will ever get an up or down. And so they don't even know if they're able to, they certainly know they're not able to proceed with their project, but they don't even know if they're able to challenge the denial or amend their project to get it done. And this bill creates an opportunity for a final decision up or down within that time frame. And that finality and that speed is going to encourage more housing development in the state of Kansas. The other thing that I want to emphasize that we discussed in the special committee is that this bill maintains local control. There's no change in the process, in the decision-making process that the local jurisdictions undertake. They just have to do it within a certain set period of time. And so the planning decisions, the land use decisions, those all stay with the local authorities. There's just some guardrails put on the amount of time they have to do those decisions. And I note that the fiscal letter on this bill indicated that the cities and counties thought there might be an increased cost, but they weren't able to even estimate what that would be. And I think, as was suggested, there are some jurisdictions where delay is not an issue, and so this bill would be a guardrail that the local governments are staying within already, but in some other jurisdictions, there's a need for this. And so I think the ability to have one rule across the state that provides finality and predictability is going to have a positive effect on housing in the state of Kansas. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope that you will advance the bill.
All right, thank you for your time. Committee, any questions for this conferee? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim, are you still with us?
Yes,
Fantastic. How you been doing?
I'm well, thank you.
I really enjoy the work that you and your organization do, but I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about your testimony on this particular bill, or actually some other questions that are in there as well. It was brought up that we might have a solution in search of a problem. How would you define the problem that we have that this particular bill is trying to address succinctly?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think there are two problems the bill addresses. One is speed, and that seems to be a problem in some jurisdictions in Kansas, but not others. The other is finality, and I think that's an issue wherever you are. When you submit a building application, you need to know within a certain period of time whether you're going to get an up or down decision. And you need to know that when you have an incomplete application, what the process is for making that application complete. And this bill accomplishes both those things, both speed and finality. And so I think it's universally beneficial, regardless of the situation on the ground, to have both those things guaranteed in state law. So when you come in as a developer in Kansas, as a property owner in Kansas, and you want to build on your property, you've got that guarantee that you're going to have a decision on your application, up or down, in a certain period of time.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, may I follow up? If you had critics who were saying that the speed and the finality that you just discussed, I'm gonna go a different direction with this particular question. If the speed and finality that you discussed are a feature of this particular bill, and you had critics who were saying that that speed and finality would actually preclude in a resource constrained environment or a complex environment, infrastructure, timelines, things of that nature to get a product to market. Have you seen, number one, what would you say about that? But the second piece, if you could color it a little bit with what you've seen across other communities or other states that have actually implemented this type of provision, are those some of the issues that you see with contracting with municipalities? Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think the example from Texas and Florida is, I think, the starkest answer to that question. Both those states have a timeline that's half what's being proposed here, and they do an exceptional job of processing those applications in a professional and timely manner. And if you look at Florida in particular, where there's been a huge increase in the number of building permit applications, they're still able to adhere to that timeline that is half what's being proposed in Kansas. So maybe one response to that criticism is that 60 days is too long, but I think I'm a firm believer in the perfect not being an enemy of the good, and I think this is a good bill.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See, so committee, I think we have written testimony from the Kansas Chamber, and this should all be in your S drive. If it's not, it will be eventually. There is another oral. Okay, I'm sorry. Andrew Weens. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Andrew Weens with Opportunity Solutions Project. I'm not going to repeat what has been said before. I thought the first two conferees did a great job. I think this is a bill that just kind of establishes the shot clock, the fast track for getting permits approved, whether it's for residential, for the housing crisis that you've heard lots of people talk about. And I think likely, I don't want to speak for them, but even the opponents of the bill will probably say we've got a housing shortage in Kansas. We need to do some things to address that. We think this is one solution to help address that. It also applies to, as the revisor said, commercial, multifamily, and industrial improvements. So I think it's a good bill. It doesn't, I don't think, step too much onto the toes of local government as far as process. It just ensures that the process moves fast. So with that, I'll be happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we do have a question from the ranking member.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. So my question is this: if we look, I understand that fast tracking this, I understand why you all support it, but my concern is this: what if, due to the fast tracking, cities might have to hire more staff to help them implement this? I don't want this to be a backdoor tax increase. Can you speak to that more, please?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative. Appreciate the opportunity to answer the question. Certainly, this bill would not have any, mandates or requirements on the city to hire more staff. We just make sure that they process the permits faster, and the shot clock would ensure that they do. I think this bill aligns incentives to ensure that they move faster.
But how would it make them move faster without hiring more staff? Like,
I'm certain that that's a possibility and maybe even a need for some. I'm not certain. I think it could be a possibility that it's needed in some jurisdictions, and you have to ask the local governments if they feel that they're properly staffed. And if they need to move staff from other areas to make sure that the permitting process moves faster, or hire new staff, or fill those FTs they've been unable to fill, I think that's something that they could decide to do. This bill just aligns incentives to make sure that they move quickly and we get development moving. Help solve our housing crisis.
okay, so it could potentially inadvertently end up in cities, like, especially I represent part of Overland Park, which is the second largest city, has tons of new developments and tons of redevelopment in some of its older areas. So again, I just don't want to vote for something that might end up being sort of an unpaid mandate that ends up coming back on my constituents at a time when they really don't need to be paying more taxes. So thank you for your help.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I would say to that, thank you for the question, Representative. This bill certainly doesn't mandate that they hire more staff. I believe it's a kind of a core function of local government to process these permits and ensure that development can move along timely. So this just makes sure it goes in that time frame. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that if staffing is the issue that's taking so long, then they probably need to hire new staff anyway. Not to mention the fact that these homes will get on the property tax rolls much sooner, and they'd probably be able to pay for the additional staff. Representative Corbett.
Just to follow up on that, they're going to be paying a price for their chance to get a building permit. But a lot of times, like in Shawnee County, there's a certain time of the month they have a planning session, and a month later that the county commissioners work. So it would be easy. Even the 2-month thing might be out of whack, but the good thing about it, like he says, the more people they can run through, the more money the county's making and the state. So I don't see why they wouldn't want that to happen.
Yep. Any other comments or questions for the conferee? All right, seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weens. All right, so as I was saying, there's written testimony from the Kansas Chamber. Is there anyone else here that wants to testify as a proponent for this bill? All right, not seeing any. Are there any neutral testimonies? All right, seeing none. We do have an opponent here, Nathan Eberlein. Welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Again, my name is Nathan Eberlein. How's that?
There you go.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Nathan Eberlein. I'm the Executive Director for the League of Kansas Municipalities. Thank you for your time here today. I've been in this role for 2 years now, and part of that responsibility has been to go around the state and to listen to hear what are the issues that each of our communities are facing. And without fail, it doesn't matter if it is from the biggest to the smallest, housing comes up. So I appreciate Mr. Weens' comments. It is certainly one that we agree. Because of that, when I heard that there was a bill, I was excited. But there have been some critical flaws that I think we have been mentioned today, at least from our perspective, that I think are worth going through. Just from the original description of the bill, two key points. The scope of this bill is quite broad, and it's uniform application. We have vastly different communities. I look at each of the places and the communities that you represent and how differently situated they are. We heard from the proponents. There are some places this will not be an issue. I've heard from some cities that will say this will not be an issue. But to look at residential, commercial, and industrial and treat them all identically according to the entire state is in some ways disrespectful for the very communities that you're here to represent. You are in very different positions, and that's part of why we emphasize the local control piece. The way, again, we know that in Florida, they have a different statewide permitting process. They have different contractors requirements that don't take into account in the same way the particularities of each individual city. We want to be a part of solutions. We want to be available. So my very first question when I heard this is an issue, give me an example. We want to talk to the cities. We want to find solutions. I have yet to hear where this is an issue. Representative Corbett, I appreciate your comment about, I don't know why the cities and counties wouldn't want this. We have a distinct incentive to get things going as fast as possible. We absolutely want it, but we want it done right. If you can look in my testimony, there's a list of just a few of the state requirements that we're beholden to what the state says. We can't give an answer until these things go into place. And the more that you move into the commercial side of things, the more that you move into the industrial side of things, this chain reaction expands so broadly. And to just say, we're gonna lump it all in together without going through the vetting process, we want things fast. We want to have things on the rolls. We want to be able to have Kansas be everything that it can be. But if we don't do this thoughtfully and taking into account both the citizenry and any concerns that they may have, but also just each of the state requirements to go into place, we're building irresponsibly. And that's the place that if we're going to have solutions, which we will happily help you get to any solutions that you want to address, let's figure out what the actual problem is, where there are actual issues that need to be addressed, and let's try to deal that with more of a scalpel approach as opposed to one just lump sum for a problem that I haven't yet to hear a single true example of. We need housing. We need to have building. We want to have our businesses thrive. That's something that we support. We want to do it thoughtfully, and this bill does not do that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and help however I can. Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Everling, for being here today and standing for questions. I was reading through your testimony, and I think I see you said there was some lists in here. I was trying to find that piece. Let me ask a quick question. When you say that we need more housing across the municipalities, you represent all the, or the Association for all the municipalities across Kansas?
We represent the cities of Kansas.
The cities in Kansas. So when it comes to the housing, is there a big need in the markets in those cities?
When I talk to city council members, city commissioners, and ask what are the biggest concerns you're facing, housing is regularly one of the first answers.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot over the summer during the campaign season and everything. I know that those who have housing want lower property taxes, and those who don't have housing want more of it, trying to find solutions for that. I know that a number of individuals have come into, proponents, opponents, whoever it might be, into this committee and others advocating to have the state provide a little bit more funding and assistance to get a little bit more housing teed up. Would you be a fan of that, or?
I'd say what I'm mostly a fan of, we want to be part of the conversation. We want to be part of the solutions. In concept, yes.
Concept, yes. Okay, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for the latitude. So is your issue with this necessarily that it has to be done, or how it's being done? I'm talking about House Bill 2088.
My concern is how it applies to the variety of property types across all jurisdictions. My takeaway, and again, to Representative Corbett's point, I think embedded in the very nature of what our communities want, we want builds to happen. We just want to make sure that there's forethought before the digs start.
Okay, and I think from what I'm seeing, even in your testimony, there is some forethought to give and respect the local control piece of it. So the implementation is, conversations as was previously discussed down at the local level. Sounds like that you'll be okay with getting a top-down funding stream from the legislature, but not necessarily something saying that you have to be more efficient and get your timelines up in order to process. So I guess my pause is, as I said before, is your contention that it has to be done, or how is to be implemented? Because it sounds like you want to have money if that's on the table.
So That strikes me as
And I'm sorry, when I say money on the table, I mean from the state, you'd be okay with the state dictating that, correct?
any sort of concept, I think, again, warrants more conversation. There's never a free handout. We don't get the free lunch. So if there's money, one, we just need to figure out whether what you're offering is prudent and makes sense, and again, addresses the specific issues that may be at play. When it comes down to the issue here, my primary concern is the treatment of residential, commercial, and industrial property uniform and irrespective of what the actual jurisdictional needs are and may be. There's too broad of application to, again, where I haven't heard where there is a specific issue at play.
And last piece, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. I appreciate that rejoinder. What I would say is, you said that you're open for the conversation, communication, and to go forward. I would think that the same thing that you're saying applies here. The bill, House Bill 2088, is probably not exhaustive. We heard original testimony earlier from the proponents that it lays out what the scheme of maneuver would be with local control to be developed further with granularity. That sounds like what you're looking for is for that conversation to continue. I think the bill allows for that. Again, I'm trying to figure out exactly what the contention is. Are you bristling that it has to be done, or are you bristling on how it should be done? Because it sounds like that there's still time, place, and opportunity for the conversation that you seek, if you're willing to have it. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm hearing you right, you're saying, you know, maybe we can have one type of bill specifically for housing, because I agree that housing is an issue and we can definitely look at deregulation, relaxing some rules for housing. But, you know, industrial applies very differently. If there's an oil plant going in, that requires a different level of examination from the cities. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah, and so I would say that this bill kind of has been sold as a housing bill, but in fact, it is using housing as kind of a inroads into kind of fast tracking certain industrial applications, which in my opinion, and for my district certainly, they don't want industrial applications fast tracked. They want deep examination and all of that. They would be open to the housing piece. Would you say broadly, you know, that would be where you're at?
Yeah, I would love to hear where the biggest problem spots are and make sure that any solutions that we have directly address it. So yes to your question and your point. That is a big part of it. There seems to be a very big difference between residential, commercial, and industrial. But again, whatever we proceed and look at as potential legislation, I just want to make sure it truly is responsive to where we're seeing issues. And that's the place I've yet to hear. If we go to this city, they're really causing us issues. I'd like to have the conversation in response to that.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was rather neutral on this from the get-go until your testimony, to be honest. So you're telling me, I have a problem with, well, show me what we're talking about here, as if the cities and municipalities don't have that data at your fingertips. If I request a breakdown for the last 5 years of the permit request times for the city of Lawrence, are you going to tell me that I'm not going to find long wait lines and responses to developers in Douglas County? Are you going to? Is that what you're telling me? That we're finding a problem, if that's the phrase I heard correctly before?
So I think there's two issues at the heart of what you're asking. One, I don't know what those processing times are going to look like, but the very important question is, are the developers frustrated with how the process goes? I'm going to get a little bit out over my skis here, and so I'm acknowledging that at the forefront. My understanding is that we often have a partial permitting process where there are continued conversations going back and forth between the cities and the developers that is a different look from what this completed permit process looks like. And so throughout those conversations, refinements happen to make sure that the project is actually working in the way that everybody expects it to. It may be more than 30 days. I would like to hear the developers frustrated with that, and are there ways that we can get to whether there are problems? And again, that's where I just haven't heard any specifics in a way that I can get concrete information. Is that fair and responsive?
No, that felt like a duck, but I'll tell you, I mean, we all represent areas for which we live. And at least for the residential portion, there might be merit for the commercial and industrial side of this discussion. But I'll tell you, residential developers are having problems, and without throwing their names under the bus on record, and in the locations that I just mentioned, there's your evidence. I mean, I'm frustrated that from the municipalities that you don't have that information on your fingertips, knowing that we were hearing this bill today. I would think that you would. I mean, you're asking us to bring that, or anybody to bring specifics. I feel like that may not be the right place to be calling out names and places and developers here, but that's the point of this hearing. I'm telling you, from my district, it is a problem. I hear about it all the time, especially from the residential side. So I'm telling you, let's dive deeper into that and change the tone of this conversation, because it's frustrating.
And so, again, the question that we're trying to get to, are those delays happening because of the state requirements, fire marshal, KDHE, all these different pieces, or is this something that is actually city-centric? Those are the questions that we have to have. To your point on what information we can have, it's not as if we keep this storehouse of information that is just at our fingertips. We are happy to reach out to our members to try to get more information, but this bill also wasn't even on the calendar as of the printed copy yesterday. So we turned around as fast as we can to collect information. I reached out to managers across the state. Again, I'm here to help as best I can and be a resource. I want to be. We're happy to dig for more information, but it's not something that I just have a file I'm holding on to back at the office.
Yeah, so we'll have research try to get that information for us before we work this bill, if we work this bill. And there may be some changes that we have to make, but and we're happy that you'll work with us on that. Representative Wilcott. Okay, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had voiced concern around the three different types of entities, whether it's commercial, residential, or industrial. Do you and or your members, would they support this bill for any of those? Or is the concern that it's across all three, or would they support it, say, for residential?
I would want to survey and get a better handle on what timelines actually take place. And again, I don't have the information on what the normal timeline looks like from one city to the next. Again, I can secure and survey them to get more information. I talked to one manager last week after we heard this, and he said, in my city, this won't be a problem at all. I could certainly see in other cities that it might be. And it's just, we have so many differences from one community to the next that we want to make sure we're taking into account.
Okay.
All right, we have two more questions, I think, or three more. So we're going to have, and we're already over time. So Representative Corbett. All right, Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of just a statement to respond to Representative Turk, if I could. I'm sure there might be developers who might be a little bit frustrated. Kind of to your point to this conference, I would have loved to have heard them in this hearing. They had the opportunity, if they wanted to discuss how frustrated they are with the process. But we just got two think tanks rather than actual Kansas developers who testified here in person. So if it is a problem, again, I would love to hear more and more data about this.
All right, and then Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to say, based on my previous world in the mortgage world and real estate, that I think single-family residential is one thing. Multifamily even is stretching it a bit. But to put commercial and industrial in this, I think is way out of line. It's two different things entirely. Affects too many people for too long of a time. So I'm opposed to.
Is there a question in there? Okay. All right, seeing no further questions, sir, thank you for coming. Is there anyone else that wants to testify against this bill? All right, so I'm going to give you both just a couple of minutes because we're over time, sorry. You can come up, just state your name first and then.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Rhiannon Friedman, and I'm the Planning and Development Director for the City of Topeka. So I'm going to play off of some of the conversation that Nathan just had, speaking from a city's perspective. So while I'm speaking in opposition of this bill the way it stands today, I do think that there is a ton of merit to residential and a 60-day permitting timeline that I would be happy to speak for the City of Topeka in saying that I think that's something we can achieve. Something that this bill does do that limits us is right now we do a really good job working with developers on phased permitting approaches for master plan developments like Wheatfield Village at 29th and Fairlawn. So understanding that projects like that are a massive undertaking, it involves new infrastructure, everything from streets to sidewalks, lighting elements. I mean, we reconfigured a road and an exit to a highway. So allowing site work to take place before full building permits were approved was something that was beneficial and cost effective for not only our team, but also for the developer. So I think putting that 60-day window would take away the opportunity for us to be able to work with them in that way. We would have to say, we can't accept this until we have everything we need to approve in 60 days. So I guess to put a bow on that, what I would say is that definitely think this is workable for residential and possibly some commercial. I think it just depends on how large the redevelopment is, but industrial, I'm thinking Mars, Frito-Lay, I don't know that's possible.
All right, so point taken, and since you're here in Topeka, I'd like to try to have a meeting with you before we work this bill to kind of get some more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any quick questions? Seeing none.
Oh, that's messed up.
Representative Penn.
That is, I'm gonna keep it Christian. Ree, how you doing? What's the best LK class?
2023.
You're damn right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks again. And sir, introduce yourself. And
Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. I'll take my time to speak very quickly about zoning. When you have zoning appeals, there are a lot of nuances in that. You also have to consider that when you have zoning appeals, part of that is the neighbors, the neighboring property owners have an opportunity to get involved in the process and actually speak for or against that project. By putting this 60-day clock on them, you're essentially telling the county or the city that we have to rush those neighboring property owners and maybe ignore their feedback, maybe say, hey, it's day 59, we can't take your feedback anymore because we have to vote up or down on this tomorrow. So I don't want to do that. I don't think that that is appropriate for a Board of Zoning Appeals to say it's day 59, your feedback can no longer be considered because we have to make our decision tomorrow. That's not appropriate in my view of how we should be taking care of those types of things at the local level. I think instead we should be able to work with the developer, work with the neighboring property owners to see if we can come to some sort of resolution without being under the time pressure of a 60-day clock or a 30-day clock or whatever that might be, particularly when we're talking about larger, more complex projects. I think a single house on a single street, that may be one thing that we don't necessarily have all of the moving parts. But if you're talking about an entire new subdivision or a large commercial development, that's something entirely different that we may need to take more of a look at and make sure the neighbors have their feedback on that. I'd be happy to stand for questions if there are any.
so on the zoning thing, once the zoning is established, then would you be all right with the 60-day process for any permits in that zoning?
Once the zoning has been if the zoning has been established and there's no zoning appeal, I think probably the best thing here would be to take zoning appeals out of this, so that if there is something that, that needs to be looked at in the zoning, if there are neighbors that have a problem with that sort of change, that their voices can be heard. I think if we do require that the 60-day limit applies to zoning as well, those individuals might not get their voice heard, or they may have their interests overridden. And so I'm very cautious of that.
All right, Representative Sutton, and then we're out.
Batting cleanup. I like that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, a couple of questions for you. First off, why are you waiting to day 59? Why don't you ask it about day 2?
No, I think that obviously the county would ask. The question is, do the neighbors respond on day 2, or do the neighbors respond on day 59? And if they respond on day 59, do we tell them, sorry, you're too late?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other question would be on bigger issues, like you were talking about divisions or industrial and commercial. How long is a realistic period of time? How long does it actually take you?
Well, that depends, because if you
in real life, how long does it take you?
How long does it take? It can take anywhere from a few months to maybe a year or two for a complex development that changes over time.
I think we just discovered the reason for this bill. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But that would only be if the proposals were changing over time, because people ask questions about that. So I don't know if that deals with a complete application or not, or what would be considered a complete application in that case.
All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right, so all other testimony is going to be written at this point. I don't think there's anybody else here to testify, but if we've got to move on because tax is coming in here in about 15 minutes. I want to remind everybody, I'm going to close the hearing on that, and then remind everybody that Monday is the last day to request bills in this committee. And I'm going to circle back to bill introductions. For now, Representative Laura Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have RS 0611, and this is a disability workforce bill requested by Sarah Hartweir with the Kansas Council on Developmental Disabilities.
All right, seeing no objection, we'll accept the bill. We are not meeting tomorrow, committee, so enjoy your afternoon off if we can get off the floor. And we'll see you Monday. Thanks.